Thanksgiving had always been a bittersweet time for me. The warmth of family gatherings was often tainted by my parents' condescending remarks. This year was no different. I stood by the kitchen door, balancing a tray of freshly carved turkey, listening to the faint hum of conversation drifting from the living room. The sound of clinking glasses and laughter masked the true nature of the discussion. "Liam, don't even try to tell your brother about you and his wife's affair." My mom's voice sliced through the noise, startling me. "Do you want him to move back in with us, struggling with a divorce? The kids would grow up without a family. Don't ruin their happiness over her small affair. It happens to everyone." The tray wobbled in my hands, the turkey threatening to slide off as my grip faltered. I froze, heart pounding. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding, a poorly timed joke. "My brother Liam's affair with Stella, my wife?" My dad's gruff voice followed, confirming my worst fear. "Okay, but when the kids turn 18, I'll tell them the truth. They have to know who their real father is." Real father? My mind raced, struggling to piece together the implications. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. The tray shook again in my hands, and I quickly set it down on the countertop before it crashed. From the living room, my mom laughed softly. "Honestly, if he were smart, he'd thank us. Without Liam, those kids wouldn't have a shot at decent genes. He should be grateful." "Grateful?" My dad added. "Yeah, besides, he'd never be able to handle the truth anyway. He's always been too weak to face reality. Liam's practically been running his life for him." "Weak?" The word stabbed deeper than it should have. I staggered back, leaning against the countertop for support. My wife had been cheating on me with my own brother, and my parents not only knew but condoned it. Worse, they ridiculed me behind my back, dismissing me as some kind of naive fool. The room spun, the voices from the living room blurring into a muddled hum. I steadied myself, taking a deep breath. No, this wasn't a joke. Their voices were too casual, too confident. They'd been carrying this secret for years, lying to my face at every family dinner, every holiday. The betrayal wasn't just Stella's. It was all of theirs. "Hey, Austin, you're just going to stand there or bring the turkey in?" Liam's voice called out, smug and unbothered, cutting through my swirling thoughts. I straightened up, my hands clenching in a fist at my sides. I considered storming into the living room, throwing the platter of turkey right into his arrogant face and demanding answers. But as tempting as it was, I knew better. I wouldn't let them see me unravel. Not yet. Taking another deep breath, I forced my expression into something neutral and grabbed the tray again. My footsteps felt heavy as I walked into the living room, where they all sat comfortably, as if nothing was wrong. "Finally," my mom said, gesturing at the empty spot on the table. "We've been waiting." I placed the tray down without a word, keeping my eyes on the food rather than their faces. Liam was lounging in his chair, a smug grin on his face as he raised his wine glass to me. Stella sat next to him, her laughter trailing off as she caught my gaze. For a brief moment, there was something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, but she quickly masked it with a bright smile. "Thanks, honey," she said, her tone overly sweet. "The turkey looks amazing." My stomach churned. I wanted to shout, to confront her right then and there, but instead I nodded and took my seat. My parents were busy pouring drinks, their laughter grating in my ears. The table was a cacophony of clinking glasses, forks scraping plates, and mindless chatter. All the while, my mind was racing, replaying their words over and over. "So, Austin," my dad said suddenly, snapping me out of my thoughts. "How's work? Still at that little marketing firm?" I looked up, forcing a smile. "Yeah, it's been busy. Lots of new clients this quarter." "That's good," he said, nodding. "Though maybe you should take some pointers from Liam. He's got a real knack for leadership. People just naturally follow him." Liam smirked, raising his glass. "Just doing my part, Dad." The rage bubbled up again, but I pushed it down. I'd had enough for one night. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, standing abruptly. Without waiting for a response, I left the table and headed upstairs to the guest bathroom. Locking the door behind me, I leaned against the sink, gripping the edges tightly. My reflection stared back at me, pale and shaken. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to demand answers. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Confronting them now would only give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. No, I needed to think this through, to figure out my next move. Pulling out my phone, I opened my messages and stared at Stella's name. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Do you have anything you want to tell me?" I typed but didn't send it. "Not yet." Instead, I closed the app and slid the phone back into my pocket. I needed more than just an angry text. I needed proof, a plan. Taking a deep breath, I splashed cold water on my face and forced myself to calm down. When I returned to the table, no one seemed to notice my absence. They were too engrossed in their conversations, laughing and joking as if they hadn't just shattered my world. "You okay?" Stella asked as I sat back down, her tone laced with casual concern. "Yeah," I said shortly, avoiding her gaze. "Just needed a minute." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I nodded and smiled in all the right places, playing my role to perfection. But inside, I was already planning my escape. Weak? They'd see just how weak I really was. Later that night, as I lay in bed beside Stella, her breathing soft and even, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. The betrayal cut deep, but it also lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to let them win. Not Stella, not Liam, not my parents. They thought they had me fooled, thought they could control me. But they were wrong. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee, my mind racing. Stella's car keys jingled as she walked into the room, her heels clicking against the tile. She seemed cheerful, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "What's on your schedule today?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Just the usual," I said evenly, not looking up. My calmness surprised even me. "What about you?" "Busy day at the office," she replied, leaning down to kiss me on the cheek. I stiffened, but didn't pull away. "Don't forget, we're supposed to meet with Liam and your parents this weekend. Your mom's been texting me nonstop." "Can't wait," I said flatly, taking another sip of coffee. She didn't seem to notice the sarcasm. "All right, see you tonight," she chirped, grabbing her bag. The door clicked shut behind her, and I waited a few moments to ensure she had driven off. Then I sprang into action. Years of quiet observation had taught me how to plan meticulously, and now, every skill I'd honed was about to pay off. First, I changed all the locks on the house. The toolkit from the garage made quick work of it, and by the time I finished, sweat trickled down my forehead, but satisfaction burned in my chest. The house was now mine alone. Next, I went upstairs to pack bags for Zoe and Caden. I moved quietly, careful not to disturb their peaceful slumber. My heart clenched as I folded their tiny clothes and stuffed their favorite toys into the bags. Zoe's stuffed bunny, the one she couldn't sleep without, and Caden's action figures were among the first things I packed. They deserved better than this tangled web of lies. Once their bags were ready, I moved to my office. The financial accounts were next. I opened my laptop and began transferring every cent from our joint accounts to my personal one. The screen's glow illuminated my determined expression as I typed rapidly, my fingers flying over the keyboard. Stella might have thought she had me fooled, but she hadn't accounted for my diligence. The balances drained to zero in minutes. After securing the finances, I took a moment to breathe. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that comes just before a storm. My phone buzzed with a message from Stella's mom, asking if I'd seen her recent holiday photos. I ignored it. There was no time for small talk now. I glanced at the clock. It was almost noon. Stella would return in a few hours, expecting the warm home she'd left in the morning. Instead, she'd find a fortress she couldn't enter, stripped of everything familiar. The final step was leaving a message, a parting shot that would let her know just how much I'd uncovered. I grabbed a pen and a piece of paper from the kitchen counter and wrote, "Weak? Let's see who's weak now." I taped the note to the front door, positioning it so it would be the first thing she saw when she returned. The thought of her expression when she read it brought a grim smile to my face. By early afternoon, I was buckling Zoe and Caden into their car seats. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Zoe asked, clutching her bunny. "We're going on an adventure," I said, forcing a smile. "Just the three of us?" Caden's eyes lit up. "Like a camping trip?" "Something like that," I said, ruffling his hair. The drive out of town was surreal. The familiar streets blurred past as I navigated toward the highway, leaving behind the life I'd once thought was mine. Zoe hummed softly in the back seat, and Caden played with his action figures, blissfully unaware of the upheaval. Hours later, we arrived at a small motel on the outskirts of a neighboring city. The neon sign buzzed faintly as I parked the car and carried our bags inside. The room was modest but clean, with 2 double beds and a tiny kitchenette. It would do for now. After settling the kids in, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. A part of me expected it to ring any moment, Stella's name flashing on the screen. But the silence stretched on, unbroken. I knew it was only a matter of time before she returned home and discovered the note. That evening, as the kids slept soundly in the next bed, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The enormity of what I'd done hit me like a tidal wave. I'd uprooted our lives in a single day, leaving behind everything familiar. But it was the only way to protect myself and my children from the lies that had tainted our family. At midnight, my phone buzzed. Stella's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. She called again and again, each time leaving frantic voicemails. Austin, what the hell is going on? Where are you? Why are the locks changed? Where are the kids? Call me back, please. Her voice cracked on the last word, but I felt no pity. I deleted the messages without listening to the rest. An hour later, Liam tried calling. I stared at his name, my jaw tightening. The audacity of him reaching out after everything he'd done made my blood boil. When the phone stopped buzzing, I blocked his number. The next morning, I took the kids out for breakfast at a nearby diner. Caden shoveled pancakes into his mouth while Zoe sipped her orange juice, her bunny perched on the table beside her. I watched them, my heart aching with a mixture of love and guilt. They deserved stability, a sense of normalcy. I'd have to find a way to give that to them, no matter what. By the time we returned to the motel, my phone was flooded with texts and missed calls. Stella, my parents, Liam, all of them were desperate to reach me. Each message was a variation of the same theme: confusion, anger, pleading. I scrolled through them, my lips curling into a bitter smile. They thought they could manipulate me into coming back, thought their lies would keep me tethered. But they were wrong. One message from my mom caught my eye. Austin, you're being unreasonable. We can talk this through like adults. Don't ruin the kids' lives over something so trivial. Trivial. The word burned in my chest. Betrayal, deceit, and the shattering of my family. And she called it trivial? I put the phone down, refusing to respond. They didn't deserve an explanation. They'd made their choices, and now they'd face the consequences. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Caden looked up at me with sleepy eyes. Are we going back home tomorrow? I hesitated, smoothing his hair. Not tomorrow, buddy, but we're going to make a new home. Somewhere really nice. You'll see. Zoe clutched my hand. As long as we're with you, Daddy, it's okay. Her words pierced through me, filling me with a fierce determination. No matter what, I'd protect them. I'd give them the life they deserved, free from the shadows of betrayal. Stella, Liam, my parents, they could beg for forgiveness all they wanted. But this time, I held all the power. For weeks, Stella's frantic calls bombarded my phone. At first, I silenced the ringer and ignored the buzzing, but the persistence was relentless. Her voice messages ranged from tearful apologies to seething anger. Each one was a testament to her unraveling control. Austin, please. Let's talk. I can explain everything. You don't understand, one voicemail began, her voice cracking. Then came another. You think you can just take the kids and disappear? You have no idea what you're doing, Austin. I played them on speaker in the motel room one night, the kids blissfully asleep. Her words washed over me like meaningless static. The woman I thought I knew sounded like a stranger. The most outrageous came from Liam himself. His tone, as smug as ever, carried through the voicemail. Look, man, it's not what you think. Stella and I, we just clicked. But you're a great dad. The kids need you. Don't be selfish. Selfish? A bitter laugh escaped my lips. This, from the man who had betrayed his own brother. The nerve of him to act as though his actions were justified left me gripping the edge of the motel nightstand. I deleted his message without hesitation. My parents tried reaching out too. Their attempts were coded in the same toxic rationalizations that had always marked their moral compass. It was for the greater good, my mom said in one message. You're not perfect, Austin. You've made mistakes too. Mistakes? Their betrayal was hardly on the same level as my imperfections. The audacity of their moral superiority was astounding. I stopped listening to the rest of their messages and blocked their numbers. 2 weeks in, Stella shifted tactics. The sweet, pleading calls gave way to calculated manipulation. She called from different numbers, hoping to catch me off guard. Austin, if you don't come back, I'll get the police involved, one voicemail threatened. You think you can take the kids and just vanish? That's kidnapping. Her desperation was palpable, but her words only steeled my resolve. I knew the law well enough to understand my rights. I documented everything, the financial accounts, the evidence of her infidelity. I wasn't running from justice. I was shielding my children from a life built on lies. One afternoon, while Caden napped and Zoe colored on the motel desk, I sat by the window scrolling through emails. Most were from work, the mundane updates and deadlines a sharp contrast to the chaos of my personal life. Then, an email from Stella appeared in bold at the top of my inbox. The subject line read, "We need to talk." Against my better judgment, I opened it. Her words poured out in long, disjointed paragraphs. Austin, I know you're angry, but this isn't fair. The kids need their mother. Whatever happened between Liam and me doesn't change that. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Please come home. Fix this? As though it were a cracked vase that could be glued back together. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to respond. But what would I say? That I could never forgive her? That I didn't even recognize her anymore? Instead, I closed the email and slammed the laptop shut. The motel room began to feel like a prison after a while. The kids, though resilient, started asking questions. Daddy, when are we going back home? Caden asked one night, his big eyes staring up at me as I tucked him in. I hesitated, smoothing the blanket over his small frame. Not for a while, buddy, but we're going to find a new home soon. Somewhere special. Just for us? He nodded sleepily, his trust in me unshaken. Zoe, already half asleep, clutched her stuffed bunny tightly. Her quiet presence reminded me why I was doing this. They deserved better, a life free from the shadows of betrayal and manipulation. 3 weeks in, I found a small rental house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, just a modest 2-bedroom with a tiny backyard, but it was a start. The kids were thrilled, running from room to room, their laughter echoing off the bare walls. Can we paint my room pink? Zoe asked, spinning in circles. Absolutely, I said, smiling for what felt like the first time in weeks. Caden found a patch of dirt in the backyard and declared it the perfect spot for a garden. We can plant tomatoes and carrots, he announced. Their excitement was contagious, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. This was our fresh start. But Stella wasn't done. One evening, as I unpacked boxes, my phone buzzed with a new number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Austin. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the static of the line. Where are you? Somewhere you can't reach us. I said evenly, keeping my tone calm. You can't just take the kids and disappear, she snapped. This isn't how adults handle things. How adults handle things? I repeated, anger flaring. Like sleeping with my brother and lying to my face for years? Like letting our parents cover for you? Is that what you mean by handling things like adults? There was a pause on her end, a sharp intake of breath. I made a mistake, she said finally, her voice softer. But that doesn't mean you get to punish me by taking the kids. This isn't about punishing you, I said. It's about protecting them. They deserve better than the mess you and Liam created. You're being unreasonable, she said, her tone hardening again. You think you're some kind of hero, but you're just running away. I hung up before she could say more. My hands shook as I set the phone down, the weight of her words pressing against my chest. But deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. She could twist the narrative all she wanted, but the truth was unshakable. The next day, I met with a lawyer to solidify my custody arrangements. I laid everything out, the affair, the lies, the years of deception. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara, listened intently, her pen moving swiftly across the notepad. "You've got a strong case," she said finally, looking up, "but it won't be easy. Stella will fight back, and with your parents supporting her, it could get messy." "I'm ready for messy," I said firmly. "I just want what's best for my kids." She nodded. "Then we'll fight for that. But be prepared. This will take time." Time. It was the one thing I had plenty of now, and I was willing to use every second to ensure my children's future. That night, as I watched Zoe and Caden sleep in their new rooms, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and peace. The road ahead was daunting, but for the first time, I felt like I was moving forward. The calls, the messages, the threats, they were just noise now, fading into the background. Stella, Liam, my parents, they'd made their choices. Now I was making mine, and this time, it wasn't about them. It was about us. Me, Zoe, and Caden. Our new beginning. 5 years had passed since the night I walked away from my old life. The toxic web of betrayal spun by Stella, my brother Liam, and my parents was now a distant memory. I had rebuilt my world brick by brick, crafting a life centered around my kids, Zoe and Caden, and the peace I had desperately craved. Our new home was modest, but full of love, a small suburban house with a well-tended garden and rooms that echoed with the laughter of my children. I had thrown myself into my work, rising to a leadership position at a tech firm, and focused on giving Zoe and Caden a stable, joyful childhood. My phone number, email, and address were all changed, leaving no cracks for the past to seep through. Then, one quiet evening, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. A wave of unease prickled the back of my neck. It was my father. Reluctantly, I answered, bracing myself for whatever self-serving justification or emotional manipulation was on the way. "Hello, Austin." My dad's voice sounded older, more strained than I remembered. "I know you don't want to hear from me, but I thought you should know things have changed." I resisted the urge to hang up. "What do you want?" "It's about Stella and Liam," he said. "They're not together anymore. Haven't been for a while." The bitterness in my chest flared. "And why exactly do I care?" He hesitated. "Stella, she's not doing well. She's been asking for you. Says she'll do anything to make things right." A cold laugh escaped me. "Right? You think she can make things right? After what she did?" "She's lost Austin," he continued, his tone edging toward pleading. "She knows she messed up, but she's still the mother of your children. Can't you find it in your heart to?" "To what?" I cut him off sharply. "Forgive her? Pretend it never happened? Give her a free pass to waltz back into my life?" "People make mistakes," my dad said quietly, though I could hear the underlying weariness. "You made them too." I tightened my grip on the phone. "You think what she did was a mistake?" "That wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Repeated. Deliberate. Supported by you, by Mom, by Liam. And now you want me to clean up the mess?" He sighed heavily, his silence speaking volumes. Finally, he muttered, "You're still holding on to a lot of anger. And you're still dodging responsibility." I shot back. "If you're calling to ease your conscience, don't. You made your bed. Lie in it." Before he could respond, I ended the call, my hand shaking as I set the phone down. The weight of the conversation lingered, but not in the way it once might have. Their chaos was no longer my burden to bear. Later that night, I sat on the couch, scrolling through pictures of Zoe and Caden on my phone. They were teenagers now. Caden was excelling at soccer, and Zoe had recently won a regional art competition. They had grown into incredible kids, untouched by the darkness that once loomed over us. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. "Austin, it's Stella. Please, can we talk? I need to see you. I'm sorry for everything." Her words stirred something I couldn't quite name. Regret? Anger? Indifference? It had been so long since I'd last heard from her, and yet her voice echoed clearly in my mind, pleading, lying, begging. I locked the phone and put it face down on the coffee table. The next morning, Zoe found me in the kitchen as I sipped my coffee. She sat across from me, her brow furrowed in curiosity. "Dad, are you okay? You've been quiet since last night." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about work." She didn't look convinced. "You're sure?" "Positive," I said, reaching over to ruffle her hair. "Now, what's this I hear about you wanting to start guitar lessons?" She lit up instantly, the concern melting from her face. "Yes. Mrs. Turner says I have a good ear for music. Then we'll make it happen," I said. Moments like these reminded me why I had fought so hard to protect this new life. Nothing, no call, no text, no ghost from the past could take this away. A week later, my resolve was tested again. Another message from Stella appeared on my phone. "Austin, please. Just one conversation. I need closure." "We both do." This time, something in me shifted. Against my better judgment, I typed a response. "Closure? You're 5 years too late." Her reply came almost instantly. "I know, but I'm trying. Please, for the sake of the kids, can we talk? For the sake of the kids." It was a manipulative phrase, but it worked its way under my skin. After pacing the kitchen for what felt like an eternity, I finally gave in and sent a curt message. One conversation. That's it. I didn't come to the decision lightly. After 5 years of silence, revisiting the tangled mess of betrayal wasn't on my agenda. But something in need for closure, or maybe just a desire to face them one last time, compelled me to agree when they reached out. So here I was, standing outside a coffee shop that smelled of roasted beans and memories I didn't want. I pushed the door open. The sight waiting for me inside felt surreal, like stepping into a bad dream. Stella and Liam sat at a corner table. A space that once might have been cozy now felt suffocating. Stella looked a shadow of the woman I'd once loved. Her hair hung limp around her pale face, and her hands fidgeted nervously with a napkin. Liam, who had once been the epitome of smug arrogance, was slouched, his eyes darting nervously toward the door as I walked in. They looked as though the weight of their choices had finally crushed them. I approached the table slowly, my steps deliberate, and sat down without a word. The silence hung heavy, and for the first time, they seemed to understand the gravity of their actions. Stella was the first to speak. Her voice, thin and trembling, broke through the tension. "Austin," she began, her eyes red-rimmed and glistening. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you'd agree." I said nothing, leaning back in my chair. I wanted to hear what they had to say before I let loose the storm brewing inside me. She faltered, wringing the napkin in her hands until it tore. "I don't even know where to start. I was stupid, selfish. I ruined everything, and I'm sorry." Her words hung in the air, the apology I had once yearned for now feeling hollow and far too late. She swallowed hard and continued. "I've lost everything, Austin. You. The kids. Even Liam. Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. I let her cry, offering no comfort. I wasn't here to mend what she had broken. Liam shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearing his throat. "Look," he started, his tone unsure. "We were wrong, okay? We know that now. But it's been 5 years, man. Don't you think it's time to move past this?" I raised an eyebrow, finally breaking my silence. "Move past it?" I repeated, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. Funny how that works when it's your mess we're talking about. You think 5 years is a magic number that erases everything. His jaw tightened, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "We're family," he said, his voice rising slightly. "At the end of the day, blood is blood. What good is holding on to all this anger?" I let out a sharp laugh, leaning forward. "Family," I said slowly, the word tasting like poison on my tongue. "You don't get to play that card, Liam. Not after you destroyed mine." He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "And let's get one thing straight. My anger? That's not your concern. I've moved on, Liam. But don't mistake that for forgiveness." Stella sniffled, pulling herself together enough to speak again. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice quieter now. I miss the kids, Austin. I know I don't deserve to see them, but they're my children too." Her words hit a nerve. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "You think I kept them from you out of spite?" "No, Stella. I kept them away because I wanted them to have a chance at a normal life. A life without lies, manipulation, and betrayal. They're happy now. They're thriving. And they don't need you dragging them back into the mess you created. Her face crumpled, but I pressed on. You didn't just betray me, Stella. You betrayed them. You made choices that shattered their family. And now you want to waltz back in and act like it can all be fixed with a few tears and apologies. I just want to make things right, she whispered, barely audible. I shook my head. Some things can't be fixed. Liam slammed his hand on the table, startling both Stella and me. Enough with the martyr act, Austin, he snapped. You think you're so perfect? Like you haven't made mistakes? We're all human. We screwed up. Yeah, but holding this over our heads forever? That's not noble. It's petty. I stared at him, unflinching. You want to talk about mistakes, Liam? Fine. Let's talk. Tell me, at what point did you think it was okay to sleep with your brother's wife? Was it the first time you crossed the line, or did you need a few practice rounds to feel good about it? His face turned red, but I didn't let him respond. And spare me the self-righteous lectures about family. You don't know the first thing about loyalty. You're just mad that I walked away and left you to deal with the consequences. Stella reached out, her hand trembling as it rested on the table between us. Austin, please, she said, her voice cracking. I'm not asking for us to go back to what we were. I want to be part of their lives again. Even if it's just a little. I stared at her hand for a long moment before meeting her eyes. You don't get to make that decision, Stella. You lost that right when you put yourself above them. If they want to see you when they're older, that's their choice. But for now, I'm protecting them. From you. From Liam. From all of this. The weight of my words seemed to crush her, and she sank back into her chair, defeated. Liam sat silently, his earlier bravado gone, replaced by a sullen glare. I stood, pulling a few bills from my wallet and tossing them on the table. You asked me here to talk, and now I've talked. But let's make one thing clear. This is the last conversation we'll ever have. My life, my kids' lives, don't include you anymore. Enjoy the life you built. You earned it. Stella sobbed quietly as I turned and walked away. Liam called after me, his voice desperate. Austin, come on, man, don't do this. I didn't look back. The door swung shut behind me, cutting off their voices and sealing the chapter for good. Outside, the air was crisp, the sun just beginning to set. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. They had wanted forgiveness, but this wasn't about them. This was about me reclaiming the power they had tried to take. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a picture of Zoe and Caden, smiling brightly in front of the garden we'd planted together. They were my anchor, my purpose, and the proof that I had done something right in the midst of all the chaos. As I walked to my car, I felt an unshakable sense of closure. The reckoning was over, and I had won, not because I had defeated them, but because I had chosen myself and my children over the wreckage of the past. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The years that followed my meeting with Stella and Liam weren't without their challenges, but they were transformative. I poured everything into my kids, my work, and rebuilding the pieces of my life that had been shattered. In time, life began to take on a rhythm that felt, if not perfect, at least peaceful. It was during one of Caden's soccer games that I first met Allison. The kids had persuaded me to sign Caden up for a local team, and he quickly became one of their star players. I'd gone to every match, cheering from the sidelines while Zoe sat beside me, doodling in her sketchbook. That day, as Caden celebrated a goal, I heard a laugh beside me. It was warm, genuine. I turned to see a woman, around my age, clapping enthusiastically. "Number 10 is yours, right?" she asked, her hazel eyes sparkling. "Yeah, that's Caden," I said, smiling. "He's been working on that shot for weeks. Well, it's paying off. He's got quite the left foot," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "My son, Juan, is number 8. He's been talking about Caden nonstop. Says he's the best player on the team." We chatted for the rest of the game, swapping stories about our kids and sharing laughs over the antics happening on the field. When the final whistle blew and the kids ran to us, Allison and I exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch. Over the next few months, Allison and I grew closer. At first, it was casual, playdates for the kids, coffee after practices. But slowly, those moments turned into dinners, late-night phone calls, and long walks where we shared our pasts. One evening, after the kids had fallen asleep at her place, I told her everything: Stella, Liam, the betrayal, the fallout. I braced myself for judgment, for pity, but Allison gave neither. "You've been through hell," she said softly, placing her hand over mine. "But look at what you've built. Your kids are incredible. You're incredible." Her words struck a chord in me, something I hadn't realized I needed to hear. For so long, I defined myself by the scars of my past. But Allison saw beyond that, to the man I was trying to become. The first time Allison met Zoe and Caden officially, I was a nervous wreck. I'd kept our relationship separate from my life with the kids, not wanting to rush anything. But Allison insisted she didn't need to be introduced. She already felt like she knew them from the stories I'd told. We met at a park, neutral ground, and Caden immediately challenged Allison's son, Juan, to a race. Allison didn't hover or try too hard. She let things unfold naturally. By the end of the afternoon, Zoe was showing Allison her sketchbook, and Caden had declared Juan his best soccer buddy. That night, as I tucked Zoe into bed, she looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, is Miss Allison going to be around a lot?" I hesitated, unsure of what she was asking. "Would you like that?" She nodded, a shy smile on her face. "She's nice. She makes you happy." Her words stayed with me long after she'd fallen asleep. As the months turned into years, Allison became an integral part of our lives. She wasn't just my partner. She was my equal, someone who shared the weight of raising a family and brought lightness to moments that once felt heavy. Caden and Juan became inseparable, often roping Zoe into their games despite her protests. Allison encouraged Zoe's art, gifting her a set of professional pencils and sketch pads for her birthday. One evening, while Allison and I were making dinner, Caden burst into the kitchen. "Allison," he said, his voice serious, "can you come to my soccer game next week?" She glanced at me, then knelt to his level. "Of course I can. You want me to cheer extra loud?" Caden nodded, then added, "You're like another mom." Her eyes filled with tears as she hugged him, and in that moment, I realized just how deeply she'd become part of our family. As for Stella and Liam, their lives took a different trajectory. Occasionally, I'd hear snippets about them through mutual acquaintances. Liam had struggled to keep a job, bouncing from one failed venture to the next. Stella's attempts to reconcile with the kids had been met with resistance. There were moments when I'd receive emails from her, long, rambling messages filled with apologies and pleas. I'd read them, not out of curiosity, but to remind myself of how far I'd come. The last one came on a rainy Sunday. It read, simply, "Austin, I know I don't deserve it, but if you can find it in your heart to let me see them, I'd do anything. Please." I stared at the screen for a long time before deleting the email. I didn't reply. The day Allison and I got engaged was quiet and intimate, just the way we both wanted. I proposed during a picnic at the park, the same one where she'd first met the kids. "Are you sure about this?" she teased as I held out the ring, her eyes shimmering with happy tears. "Absolutely," I said, my voice steady. "You've given me everything I didn't think I'd ever have again. A partner. A future." She said yes, and when we told the kids, their cheers could have filled a stadium. Caden immediately started planning the wedding, insisting he and Juan would be co-ring bearers. Zoe, in her quiet way, hugged Allison tightly and whispered, "I'm happy you're here." The wedding day arrived with clear skies and bright smiles. It wasn't a grand affair, just close friends and family, gathered in the backyard of our home. As I stood at the altar, waiting for Allison, I glanced at Caden and Zoe, standing proudly beside me. Caden was practically bouncing with excitement, while Zoe clutched her bouquet, her smile steady and serene. When Allison appeared, walking toward me with Juan by her side, I felt a lump in my throat. She was radiant, yes, but more than that, she was real. She was the woman who had seen my worst and chosen to stay. The ceremony was simple, the vows heartfelt. "You gave me back my life," I told her, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I promise to spend the rest of it giving you the same." When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, The kids erupted into cheers, and I pulled Allison into a kiss that felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. That night, as the celebration wound down, I stood in the yard, watching Caden and Zoe chase fireflies with Juan. Their laughter filled the air, mingling with the soft hum of conversation from our friends and family. Allison appeared beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. I looked at her, then back at the kids. "I'm thinking this is the life I deserved." And for the first time in years, I truly believed it.